Alrighty, well, welcome to Club Entrepreneur Duluth's January event. I hope that everyone is having a great start to their new year, and if they aren't, I would talk to Pam. She's somewhere out there. I'm sure she can help you out. Also want to thank the Kitchi for hosting this event today. If you're interested in membership, be sure to talk to Paul, and he would be happy to give you some more information. Some of the upcoming events we have is going to be in February. We're having a Pechakucha. And then in March is going to be building effective boards. Today I'm very excited to be introducing our guest today, Darin Lynch. Darin is the founder and CEO of Irish Titan, a digital agency focused on e-commerce, complex websites, and digital strategy. Darin offers over 20 years of leadership, sales, and marketing, web and technology experience ranging from Fortune 100 financial firms to national retailers to startups and early stage companies. He's trademarked business first, online second as one of the key principles that defines Irish Titan's why. That serves as the foundation for the team of Titans, client base, and a range of services provided by Irish Titan. Darin is a regular speaker at national and local events and has been honored as a 40 under 40 winner by the Minneapolis St. Business Journal, one of the Real Power 50 by Minnesota Business, involved at the Minnesota Cup, and a mentor at the University of St. Thomas. Irish Titan was awarded in 2014 and 2015 as one of the best places to work by both the Minnesota Business and Minneapolis St. Business Journal. And was a 2014 finalist for the Minneapolis Business Ethics Award. Good guy to know. Well, if I don't mind introducing you, if you want to come on up, and we're excited to have you. Thanks, Darin. Yeah.
Well, let me see if I can make this a little bit higher. I guess I wasn't overly prepared. I should have done that. Thanks for having me up here. This is a nice facility. It's my first time at the Kitchi Gammi Club, right? Did I pronounce it right? Great. I hope everybody's enjoying ClubE. We are big proponents of it down in Minneapolis. And an unrequested shout out for the Pechakucha event in February. Is that what's coming up in February? Those are super fun. Craig can describe them a little bit later, but if you guys can make that event, I think you'll like it. Those are always my favorite ClubEs. Go ahead and eat for anybody who's getting their food. Don't wait for this to be done. Couple of housekeeping items. I'm going to speak about demystifying digital. And what I mean by that is digital, internet, web is a space that's often misunderstood, but people are reluctant to admit that because we all use it every day. I would venture to say that probably 90% of the people in this room have a smartphone, maybe 100%. So if you're using that, you're using web. We all have computers. I would venture to say 100% of the people in this room have computers. So we're all using web, but it can be an intimidating, imposing, confusing area, and people are reluctant to talk about that because of the usage. So what I'm going to talk through is that demystifying digital. That is a huge landscape to cover, and so I'm going to try to keep it I will keep it to an hour. I won't run over to be respectful of people's time, but there's a lot of landscape to cover there. So there are a couple of points throughout the conversation, that's the way I like to think of it, where I'll get a pulse of the room and see what sort of things to cover. But in keeping with that sort of mentality, please ask questions, dialogue during this little talk. Don't wait for the end for a Q&A session. We'll have Q&A at the end if we don't run out of time. But ask questions as we're going through, okay? That's important to me. That's the kind of dialogue I want to have. Secondly, I say uncut and uncensored because I grew up on a farm in Iowa. My mom was an English professor, but my dad was a farmer, and he was kind of legendary in town for swearing. So I've picked up some of that. I'll try to keep it clean, but every once in a while something slips through, so I'm going to apologize in advance for that. Quick comment. I think just for everyone's benefit here, you're lucky the Steelers lost on Sunday. Or Saturday. I'm not happy about that. Or on Sunday, I guess it was. If they had won, I was going to be wearing this outfit all week to give them luck for the AFC Championship. That sweater was my present to myself for Christmas. I was shopping for other people and saw that and bought it. Okay, here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the top 10 mistakes that people make in the digital space. We'll talk about the industry and why it's confusing and imposing. We'll talk about the pieces of the industry and how they work together. We'll talk about how to select a partner, how to build your digital property, then the top 10 to-dos, and then Q&A if we have kind of a Q&A section at the end. But again, ask questions as we're going along, okay? Let's get started. The top 10 mistakes, and I still miss David Letterman, so we're going to have him up there. First of all, not knowing your brand. Brand is a misleading term in the sense that it's kind of like strategy. Brand, there are a few faces in the crowd, one right in front of me that I know can describe brand in a real sophisticated fashion. The easiest way to think about that is knowing who you are and being able to communicate that. There are lots of pillars to that, but if you don't know your brand, you're really going to struggle building your digital property. And that digital property could include your website, your social marketing, your content, whatever the piece is. If you don't know your brand, you're not going to be able to communicate that very effectively. You're going to be challenged in the project to do that, and it's not going to be as effective, okay? Now, depending on your company, the size, the industry, et cetera, and how well you do know your brand, it can be a more challenging effort, therefore more costly, or a less challenging, less costly effort to define that. But if you don't know that, you're going to struggle, okay? So that's the one thing that I would start with, making sure you know. And there are three kinds of clients in this respect related to this point. Those who know their brand and know that they know their brand, those are great. Those who don't know their brand and know that they don't know their brand, those are equally great. Those who don't know their brand but think they know their brand, and those are horrible, okay? So look at yourself in the mirror and really take an assessment of that and decide if you do or don't know your brand, and then take the appropriate steps. That'll help your project a lot. Secondly, too fast, too little. We encounter this all the time, where someone delays a decision on whatever the digital project is, and then says, okay, let's get going, we need this website in 2 months. And most of the time, websites of the type that we do can't be done in 2 months. So if you don't allow enough time for a website project, it's not going to work. If you don't allow enough budget for your website project, it's also not going to work. Okay, a couple of analogies there, things to keep in mind. If all you need is a moped, you don't need to buy a Porsche. But if you need a Porsche, you shouldn't expect to pay for a moped. Okay? Sometimes a 3-page website with WordPress or Squarespace or one of those sorts of platforms is all you need, and that's great. But lots of times, many times, what you need is something far more sophisticated than that. An e-commerce site, for example, or a robust site that has an ERP integration or a private client portal, things of that nature. If that's what you need, that's not a moped type of price, okay? So you need to have the right kind of budget for your expectations, and then your budget might either need to increase or your expectations need to decrease. A few years ago, when we started to build out our sales team, which freed me up to do more face of the company kind of stuff and get me out of the office, which I'm sure my team liked, because I mostly just screw things up if I'm there. One of the things that I received a lot of positive feedback on a panel on which I spoke was that I gave people some actual numbers, because there's a lot of reluctance in our space to spitball numbers and tell people what you really should be spending. And it's difficult to give people a number if they ask, how much should my website cost? If you don't have context, it's a little bit like, how much does a red car cost? But generally, I'm going to give you some numbers. If you have a sophisticated website, and even sophisticated is a broad category, but 10, 20 pages, and it has content management, and you might have some integration, you have some sophistication to your design, you want to attract traffic and convert it, and have some digital strategy associated with it, you should plan on spending $30,000 or up. And that's a big range, but it's not a $5,000 kind of project. You can get a website for $5,000, but that's not the website that I described. And I actually have some numbers here. So based on some statistics that came out last year, depending on your industry, the services provided, and your revenue, which that would parse this pretty specifically, 7 to 10% of your revenue should be on marketing. So 7 to 10% of your budget 7 to 10% of your revenue you should allocate to a marketing budget. And of that marketing budget, between 25 and 32% should be allocated to digital. And that 25 to 32% is only going to go up. So if you want to start to spitball some numbers on your own Excel spreadsheets, those are some numbers that you could use. One of my goals when I speak is to have people walk out with at least one action item or something that they didn't know coming into it. So that's why I try to sprinkle this with some actual data. So those numbers are real numbers. And we have clients who spend way above that, and we have clients who spend around that or a little bit below that. Clients who spend much below that usually aren't a good fit for us, which is fine, but that's when you need something more simple. Okay? Any questions so far? Comments? Rick? Oh, yeah. Good question. I meant to include that. Generally, a website project of that $30,000 and up that I mentioned, 4 to 6 months. Some can be longer because it depends on a couple of things, usually in the client's hands: content, branding, position, those sorts of things, sophistication. But 4 to 6 months is a fair estimate. Sometimes you can do it in 3. You can still do a good website in 3 if the client's real prepared and everything can move quickly. And we'll speak to some of the items that might impact that, but that's a good range. Good question, Rick. I meant to speak to that. Oops, I went one too far. Building the property for you versus your audience. We have a department called Digital Strategy, and our strategy lead talks about, he says, your clients don't care what you call it. They care what they call it. And so when you build your website, you should speak in your client's voice. You should use the terms that they use so that you're not in the weeds too much and confusing them with content that doesn't resonate with them. And also, if you really can zero in on building your property from your client's perspective, that will help you from an SEO perspective, search engine optimization, which we'll talk about a little bit, because the more your content is articulated in the verbiage your clients are using, the better the search engines will pick it up. But we see this quite frequently where our clients build the site from their perspective. Okay? Creating content for your keywords versus your audience. This is clearly related to the previous point, but it happens so frequently, I wanted to call this out. And in fact, I should perhaps update this to say ignore keywords, because keywords as a term are really largely ignored now by search indexes. If you think about Google, Bing, et cetera, they're like a really, really sophisticated, automated English professor now. What they're looking for is your site to be like a well-written article or paper that's well organized with your summary at first, supporting points that match your summary, and then a conclusion. Google rewards you for that. If you do what's called keyword stuffing, you actually get punished. So we're a digital agency in Minneapolis. We want all the business we can get. If I, in our About Us kind of copy, had digital agency in Minneapolis over and over to the point where you're reading it and you're thinking, this is annoying, and you'll see that quite frequently, especially on older sites, because people used to do that, because it did spike your rankings. Now we would get decremented for that. Okay? So build your content for your audience, not for the keywords. Here's another really common one. I hope these are all common since these are our top 10. Ignoring the journey, as we call it in our space, after people get to your website. There's a lot of attention and energy given to a homepage. Every client always wants to focus on making their homepage kick ass. But once they get there, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to explore case studies? Do you want them to sign up for events? Do you want them to browse your content and understand your services and click on a contact us for more information, a request a quote, a buy a product? E-commerce companies typically don't fall prey to this issue quite as frequently because they're focused on actually selling product. That's one of the reasons we love e-commerce clients. Because our tagline is that business first, online second. E-commerce clients know that their website is their business. They should think about it as an income statement account. Sometimes brochureware sites, non-e-commerce sites, don't think like that, and that's where we see this most frequently. So once you get people to your site, great. But if they all leave from your homepage, then it hasn't been worth it. It's just a business card then. So you need to think about the journey. That's the term in our space, about the journey that people take once they get there. Decision by committee. Speaking to why sometimes projects can take longer. When we work with large companies, not always, but quite frequently, there are a lot of people involved in the process. That slows it down, especially on the design side of things and the content side of things. From a functionality perspective, if we're defining the functionality of the site, that usually isn't as hampered by decision by committee as design and content, because everyone, in a project, everyone's an art critic and everyone's a copywriter. And so that slows things down. Full transparency, we built a site for Rick, for one of Rick's ventures, and it was the smoothest project we've ever had. I'm not just saying that, because Rick was really the one making all the decisions. He made decisions quickly and easily. We got that project done in 4 or 6 weeks. Now, it was a simple site, too, that helps. But decision by committee is painful process, okay? So if you have those sorts of dynamics, because sometimes you just can't get around it, if you have those sorts of dynamics, you should understand it's going to take longer. And then you should figure out how to mitigate that some, too, from a design perspective, because once everybody starts sharing their design input, it turns into a you-go, okay? And that can really hamper things. One of our biggest red flags is when a business owner, if it's a small, medium-sized business, says his wife, or if it's a female, says her husband, is starting to look at the design and they'll get some input to us, and we're like, oh no, because that's almost always a nightmare. Last is blurry requirements. It's easy to wrap your head around what you want the site to look like and what you want it to say, and then people frequently skip over what they want the site to do. Not just from the journey's perspective, but how do you want, if you're a manufacturer and you want people to be able to submit quotes, what sort of customization do you want in configuring the items that they'll select from? That sort of detail needs to be put into your requirements phase, because once you start programming, if you change that, it can become costly and time run. Okay? So even though I say top 10, I felt like it became a little bit redundant after that. So for 8, 9, and 10, you can just see 1 through 7. Okay? All right. So one quick thing I'll talk about to give people a sense of ease in raising your hand and saying, I need help understanding this, is the industry is hard to understand and keep up with. And I'm in the industry. So I'm not a typical founder of a digital agency. I'm not a web designer or a web developer. I didn't come out of an agency and take a book of business with me. I didn't spin out of Target and have Target as my first client, just to name some typical scenarios. I came out of a corporate IT side of business. Prior to starting Irish Titan, I was CIO at Second Swing Golf, which I always joke is ironic because I'm a shitty golfer. And I'm really bad. I'm not just, Pat can attest. I'm not an 8 handicap trying to get to 6 saying I'm bad. right. I am fun, though. And before that, Wilson's Leather, et cetera. And when I was on the other side of the table buying digital services, I sensed a real absence of business acumen from digital agencies. They were focused on the latest 3-letter acronym or the latest trend, because things change so fast in our industry. So that's why I started a business in the space. And the digital space is at the intersection of creative and technology, which are 2 fast-changing areas that are hard to describe and define, and that you can, when you do try to describe it, if we're trying to sell you services, you can use fancy terms, flashy pictures, and confuse people. So it creates this industry that is difficult to understand and feel comfortable with, especially when there's no regulation in our space. You don't need any hard capital to start. All you need is a laptop and wireless, and it doesn't even need to be your wireless. 2 people on their laptops at Panera can be a web company. And there's no licensing. I know there are people in this room that have to be licensed. And there are probably some attorneys in here, I'm guessing, have to pass the bar, those sorts of things. You don't even need, technically, you don't even need a high school degree. I know people that start companies in our space while they're in high school. So you have the confluence of those industry factors, the lack of competitive barriers, really creates an industry that's hard to understand and keep up with. So for those of you not in it, it's okay to raise your hand and say, hey, I need help navigating this. I need to find somebody that I can trust. It's not my core competency. I have my own business or my own profession that I'm trying to make money in. How do I navigate this? And that's what I'm trying to cover today. Okay? So, these are the different pieces. Can everybody hear me if I walk away a little bit? In the back, okay? All right. So these are the pieces. I want to take a quick survey of the room because probably much to the chagrin of some of the people in the room who've heard me, I've worked through this presentation a number of times before. Every time it's different because every audience is going through different things. And so quick raise of hands, and you can raise your hand multiple times. How many people are going through or contemplating going through rebuilding their website? Is there some of that in here? Okay. What about content? How many people in here have a good website, but they feel like they're not getting traffic to it, so they want to understand SEO and content and digital marketing? Is there some of that in here? Okay, a little bit less. All right, good enough. Good, because we start with the website. So my presentation was already in the right order. So all of these things work together. They really do, especially with the way digital works today. These are all interworking pieces. That's why we try to have a hub and a spoke kind of diagram here. But this is the central piece. If you have nothing else that's at least good enough, this has to at least be good enough. Okay? So your website needs to be good enough that other things around it can work when you get there. But it doesn't make any sense, to state the obvious, to do any social marketing if you don't have a website or if you have a bad website. Because even if you have a nice Facebook presence, if you're the kind of company that would make sense, every once in a while people are going to get to your site, even if they're just reading your Facebook feed. And if they see that your site looks really dated or doesn't represent how you're represented on Facebook, there's a disconnect and you immediately start to lose gravity. Okay, so your website needs to work. And the different website types are a CMS, and I'll talk about that, e-commerce, portals, proprietary, and open source. So these are some different things to think about when you build your website. So a CMS stands for Content Management System. If I use any three-letter acronyms, any TLAs, that I don't explain, raise your hand or throw some food at me or something like that, because I don't want to assume that everybody knows all the acronyms. Okay, but a CMS is a content management system. This is another point that hopefully somebody walks out of here taking a mental note, if nothing else, in that if there's nothing else you learn today, maybe those marketing numbers weren't relevant that I mentioned, everybody who has a website today should have a content management system. So a content management system allows non-technical people to log into your website and make changes. We have a content management system called Drupal, and that allows my sales and marketing coordinator to log into irishtitan.com/admin with her credentials, so different users can have different permissions, and she can update when we hire a new Titan, when we add a new service, when we launch a new website, when we want to add that to our portfolio, she can do all of that. So I'm not paying a programmer to do it, I'm not paying a designer. If you can operate Word, PowerPoint sort of skills, then a content management system will allow you to update your website as long as it was built with a content management system and built right. So examples of content management systems are WordPress, that's a really common one. A lot of people have probably heard of that. HubSpot is another one. Drupal that I mentioned. Squarespace, those that you hear advertisements for, those are content management systems. So if anybody in here has a new website that doesn't have a content management system, red flag on whoever you work with. If you have an old website that doesn't have a content management system and you're thinking about launching a new website, for those of you who raise your hands, make sure you have a content management system, okay? And then to jump ahead a little bit, the proprietary versus open source. This is a little bit more up for debate, but I have a point of view here in that everybody should have what's called an open source content management system. So proprietary, well, almost everybody. Proprietary means something that you license and you're paying for on a monthly or annual basis. Open source means there's no license fee. You'll still have to pay, probably, someone like us to build your site for you, but there's no license fee for the software. We could talk all day about the merits of each of those, so I won't get into that. I tend to prefer open source content management systems like Drupal, WordPress, Expression Engine's another big one, in case anybody's heard of that, because of the lower total cost of ownership. Those are pervasive, totally robust platforms that will not be limited, so don't worry about don't have the rightful concern, well, if I'm not paying for it, what am I going to get out of it? Because sometimes you have to pay for what you get. But an open source CMS provides a lot of value. Now, the one argument against that is the additional functionality and services that sometimes come with a proprietary CMS. I mentioned HubSpot. That's a proprietary CMS, but they specialize and do a great job with inbound marketing and have tools and functionality and services to help you attract and convert traffic if you're the right kind of client that it makes sense for. Okay? So just be aware of that content management system that you're looking at and whether it's proprietary or open source. A couple of other website types, e-commerce and portals. This is an example where sometimes we're too much in the weeds. A few years ago, someone raised their hand at one of these meetings and said, well, what is e-commerce? And I hadn't really thought to explain that. So an e-commerce site can cut a broad path. Clearly, Amazon is a e-commerce site. Is anybody here familiar with Funky Chunky? They do high-end snacks and things like that. They're in at least Lund's down in Minneapolis. They're a client of ours. They're an e-commerce company. Go online and buy their stuff and have it shipped to you. There are other sites. So, for example, ClubE, where you register, and technically you go to Brown Paper Tickets, I think, right? Yep. So Brown Paper Tickets, is that an e-commerce site or not? Technically it is, because you're paying for an event. Okay, so if you're selling anything on your site, you're e-commerce. And with that comes some additional considerations around security and things of that nature. Okay, so an e-commerce site should be thought of differently from a content management system site. Sometimes they're one and the same, but e-commerce has additional considerations. Similarly are what are called portals. And so this is typically more common in a B2B kind of environment, and there are more and more B2B clients that are offering portals on their sites. What that means is if you're a client, you can go to the site, log in, and see purchase history, see your account history, things of that nature. There's B2C aspect to that too. If you buy on Amazon, you can log into your account and see your past purchases. You could argue that's a portal. But typically when we come across portals, those are B2B, frequently manufacturers that want their clients to be able to reorder and look at past purchases that were highly configured to facilitate that process. Which sparks a thought from an e-commerce perspective. There's B2B, business to business e-commerce, and there's B2C, business to consumer. In 2014 anyway, the numbers haven't come out for 2015. In 2014, B2C e-commerce was growing at 17%, and B2B e-commerce was growing at 34%, twice the rate. So if you are a B2B player here, either you own a B2B company or you work in that space, there's an opportunity there to capitalize on that momentum. Okay? Any questions so far? Sorry about that. Let's see. Here's another takeaway. Everyone should have a content management system on their site, and everyone should have a responsive website. So responsive design means that your website will work on any device. Okay? It's really common now, but a few years ago, if you wanted to have a mobile-friendly website, you needed to build a mobile site. And you probably all knowingly or unknowingly experienced that, where you go to a website on your phone and sometimes it'll say click through to mobile, or it automatically redirects. And if you ever noticed the URL, the domain name will change to M. So we used to have a mobile site. If you'd go to irishtitan.com on your smartphone or tablet, it would redirect to M for mobile, m.irishtitan.com. Now, Google actually punishes you for that, because a few years ago, new technology came out called responsive design that was just additional upgrades to programming languages and browsers and internet protocols that allowed us, people in our space, to build websites that detected the device coming to your website and then render the site from the same source code. So in the past, if you had a mobile site, an M.dot site, you had this source code for your mobile site, which was usually completely redundant with your website code. And so if you wanted to add a new employee or a new client to your portfolio, you had to do it in both places. It would become out of date, difficult to maintain currency. With responsive design, it's all in one place. And I think it was about 2 years ago where Google came out and explicitly said, we are going to reward responsive design. Google doesn't tell us very many things explicitly. That's part of how they make $1 billion. So when they said that, that was a pretty big move. So everyone should have a responsive design site. If you're going through a website project right now and whomever you're working with isn't suggesting a content management system and or isn't suggesting responsive design, fire them today, because those are absolute best practices, okay? And there's an easy way to tell if a website is responsive. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. If you go to that's awful fuzzy, but that's all right. Okay, so this is one of our clients that we built a website for about 4 or 5 years ago. They're a management consulting private equity firm in Minneapolis. If you go, pull up your browser, go to a website, move your cursor to the corner, and start to just shrink your website down, you'll see it starts to get cut off. So that website is not responsive, okay? If you go to a website that is responsive, so this is us. Oops, let's see. I should have maybe not picked the black one. There. Okay. Now you'll see the fonts start to resize as I shrink this down to about tablet size. Then when I shrink it down to about smartphone size, you'll see the menu rearrange. Did you see that? And then that. So that's how you can tell on your computer if a website's responsive. All right? If I can get... Let's see. We'll keep going. Okay, so now we'll talk about the marketing side of things a little bit. SEO stands for search engine optimization. And what that means is how to attract traffic to your site when people are Googling or Binging. Nobody says Binging, but searching for terms, okay? There are 2 kinds of traffic that you attract. One is earned, and the second is paid. So earned means people are coming to your site because Google thinks your site meets their needs. That's earned. Paid means people are coming to your site because you paid for them to come to your site. I think one of the ways to wrap your head around digital in this demystifying sort of context is through the use of analogies. And one way to think about paid versus earned and SEO and SEM, search engine marketing, SEM technically stands for when you're paying for ads, pay-per-click, et cetera, is to think about a restaurant. So if I own a restaurant and people will come to my restaurant all the time because of word of mouth, because the people that were here last night went home and told their friends, God, the food was great there last night, great beer list. I might make a lot of beer references. Although I am on, or do we have any Amish people in here? I don't think so. I'm on Amish January. I'm not drinking for the month of January. So I think that's making me think about it even more. And I'm not drinking because I was on a leaving Las Vegas kind of bender or anything. I just had a bad Rose Bowl experience with the Hawkeyes and decided to take a month off. So anyway, if I own a restaurant and I have a lot of people coming to my restaurant because a word of mouth is good, that's like earned search. It's like search engine optimization, where Google or the people that came to my restaurant are telling people, hey, that's a great restaurant. You guys should go there. If instead I have people come to my restaurant because I have billboards or I have coupons in the Sunday flyer, that's like paid search or paid media, okay? And there's nothing wrong with either of those. Sometimes if you have a new concept, you need paid search. Think about a restaurant. If you're starting up your restaurant, you need to get people there. The word on the street isn't out there yet. You need to advertise. So there's nothing wrong with paid search. In theory, as your business matures, as your website matures, the percentage of traffic coming to your site via paid should start to balance out with via earned. It might be to the point where you can shut off paid. It might never be to the point where you shut it off. But over time, you want your organic is another term for earned. You want that traffic to grow. Okay, so paid is pay-per-click. It's those sponsored ads at the top of your Google results. It's the ads along the right-hand side. That's paid. Earned is when Google thinks that your website is the one that most suits people's needs. And you want to be on the first page for those terms that are important to you, and you want to be top 3 if at all possible. And those terms can't be things like financial benefits, because the broader the term, the more competitive it is and the harder it is to compete. The more narrow you can define what you're trying to attract, the better. So again, for us, we would want to compete more for e-commerce websites, Minneapolis, than we would for websites. And so your content that you write in social and on your website should be a little bit more targeted like that. If you're doing any paid search, any pay-per-click ads, you definitely should have those ads targeted, including negative keywords, so that you're not paying for ads that aren't a good target. An analogy there is think about buying a flat screen TV. If I'm Best Buy, if I'm Best Buy, I probably shouldn't be paying for flat screen TV, because someone who's searching on flat screen TV is probably trying to decide if they want LCD or plasma, what size they want, how those sorts of decision-making questions. But if someone's paying, or if someone is searching on 62-inch Sony Bravia LCD, that's someone that's ready to buy. Best Buy should be paying for that. Now, conversely then, Consumer Reports, theoretically, should be paying for that flat screen TV. And they have the budget to pay for that. But that would be a good target for them. Okay, so you'll want to think through that strategy of who you're trying to target and then tailor your search, your content, et cetera, around that. Does that make sense? Any questions? Rick?
So you're a business person and you have a certain amount of budget. You're looking over kind of a couple-year period. Is there any kind of rule of thumb that you might say, okay, we got to build it on the front end, then we need to maintain it, and then we need to try to drive traffic? So is there any kind of rule of thumb how you can allocate those kind of different buckets?
Yeah, it varies a little bit based on your industry type. So if you're an e-commerce company, there are hard and fast metrics, not hard and fast in the sense that you have to do it, but really defined metrics, because so much of it is income and transactionally driven. If you have a content site, a brochureware site, it can vary a little bit more. Some ways to think about that is, again, based on your revenue. So if we go back to those numbers before, that percent that should be allocated to marketing, and then of that, 25 to 32% should be allocated to digital. Usually after your site's built, you shouldn't have to spend too much, if you build your site right, on the actual site build. So your digital budget should be allocated towards marketing. And then generally, if you're starting up, the number that gets bandied about in the industry is 75% of your digital marketing should be on paid search at first, or earned, I guess I should say. And 25% should be on organic. Excuse me, I said that backwards. 75% on paid and 25% on earned. I mixed the earned in with the paid. So 75% on paid, 25% on earned. As you mature, that should reverse and then get somewhere to either 50-50 or 75 to 80% earned SEO, and 25% or less on paid search. We don't do hardly any paid search. We do a little bit of what's called retargeting. Now, retargeting or remarketing, we've probably all experienced that. If you go to Zappos and you're looking at shoes, and then you leave Zappos and go to Funky Chunky. Funky Chunky is not a good example, they don't have this. But you go to some other website, and then all of a sudden an ad shows up on that website for shoes, and specifically for Zappos. That's retargeting, where Zappos has subscribed and paid to be a part of this marketing network that tracks you based on your cookies, and on this, basically your cookies, a little bit more pixel advanced sorts of things that I won't bore you with. And then they can tell you've been to Zappos, and so on the sites that are part of this network, they'll show a Zappos ad. That started 4-ish years ago and has really blown up. That's pretty effective because we all ignore it if we don't want, but there's a relatively high conversion rate that people, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and buy those shoes. So that's called retargeting, remarketing, and that's pretty effective. That is also really part of paid search, and so that would fall into the 50% at first, and then 25% or less as you mature. Okay? Social. What's kind of funny is the origins of this presentation were actually around social, because when social blew up in 2012 was the year that this saying came out in our space that social moved from the dorm room to the boardroom. And so when that started to happen, there were a lot of business people that, well, I don't know what the hell to do with this stuff. Like, do we really need to be posting on Facebook that, you know, we went to Chipotle today and it was great? And so there were a lot of questions around that. And that was the origin of this presentation, which is now expanded, and that's why I take a survey of the room and try to get a sense of where we're going. But social marketing is really defined as any website that has user-generated content. So technically, Amazon is a social marketing website, because one of the reasons people traffic Amazon the most is to look at reviews. A lot of people will go to Amazon, look at reviews, and then leave Amazon to go buy a product somewhere else because they, for whatever reason, want to buy on the company's website instead of Amazon, maybe because they don't want that company giving up 15% to Amazon. Different story. But Amazon's reviews are really well trafficked, and those reviews are user-generated content, so therefore Amazon's a social marketing site. A lot of websites and a lot of our clients start to incorporate social marketing content into their website. A Twitter feed, a Facebook feed, LinkedIn feeds, things of that nature. Okay? So social marketing is user-generated content. And the number of social marketing platforms out there are off the charts and changing every day. The big ones are these. Everybody knows Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Google+, YouTube, which is the second most trafficked search engine, is YouTube's search engine. Reddit, Tumblr. If you're in the housing industry, there's one called House. I think it's H-O-U-Z-Z, if I remember right. That is a social marketing site for people in that space to show their work. The number of social marketing sites are astounding. And so one of the things that can be overwhelming is deciding where to start. Because again, if you go back to that hub and spoke that's right there, in theory, what can be intimidating is someone who's like, I have to do all this? I don't even know where to start. That's why, again, I said start with your website, make sure your website's at least good enough, okay? From a social marketing perspective, you should at least claim so that you can control the domain and the branding for Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Google+. At least those, and you could argue YouTube as well. At least get those for your business so nobody else can come along and take those. And either brand those with a designed page, which is not very complicated, that looks like your website, that has your colors, etc., and post content or don't. One of the things that is most damaging is for people when they post content 3 times and then quit. So blogging is another form of user-generated content, so it's social marketing. Everyone blogs 3 times if they start to blog. Once about work, once about their vacation, and once about their dog or their cat. After that, a lot of people stop blogging because they haven't thought through and committed to a content strategy. That's where tools like HubSpot can help. But that's also where you need to take a step back and decide what you're going to commit to. Because it's worse to blog 3 times and stop than to have not blogged at all. Okay? So from a social marketing perspective, you want to at least claim these so nobody else can come along and start up a Facebook page that looks like Irish Titan in our case. But then if you start to post, commit to it. And when you start to post, don't be too scared about committing to it because that doesn't mean you have to do it every day. We didn't do any social, hardly at all, until we hired a sales and marketing coordinator 3.5 years ago, I think. And then she came in and started to do it on a regular basis, and it worked great then. But I didn't do any of it until she was there because I couldn't commit to doing it on a regular basis. Couple of things to keep in mind then is your frequency can change across platforms. We post on Facebook, I think 4 or 5 times a week. On LinkedIn, a couple of times a week. Twitter comes and goes kind of based on events. We tweet a lot more when there are events going on that we're at. Instagram, we're starting to do more and more of. We blog relatively regularly now. But you can post content across those different mediums or those different platforms at varying frequencies. Just make sure to keep that up. Greg?
Yeah, you mentioned that kind of the landscape of digital, as we all know, is changing constantly. What are a few of the things you do to stay updated on your knowledge base, like subscriptions, mentors?
Well, I hire people that they keep up on it more than I do. It is hard to keep up, especially because there's so many different disciplines intertwined in our space. Because there's marketing, like the SEO, SEM, pay-per-click, remarketing, retargeting that I just talked about. There's programming, the development, and new programming standards and languages. There's design, how to best do responsive design, etc. So I keep up on it through hearing what my employees are talking about, through some of the trades that I follow, some of the groups that I'm a part of. My team keeps up on it in more detail through training that we send them to, groups that they participate in, a lot of what are called meetups where they get together and they're talking about best practices. I think from a business user's perspective, it can be a little bit intimidating to try to keep up with because it changes so quickly. One ironic website that is really good is websitemagazine.com. I don't think they do magazines anymore, but there's still websitemagazine.com, and they have a lot of good digital information that's pretty easy to digest, and it's relatively short and concise, which is good for me because I don't have any attention span. But that would be a good place for people maybe in the room to check out if they want to keep up on things. Yes? Right.
Demographic, and when I'm listening to their podcast and seeing like fitness, Instagram's more of a bigger thing versus like
Yep.
any of those. And so I think it's kind of great to find your business, your niche, and find those professionals within that to kind of see what they're doing, and that's helped me a lot in kind of understanding how to follow and keep up on all of the trends when it comes to social.
That's absolutely true, and that sparks two thoughts. From a social marketing perspective, don't feel that you need to over-engineer your content. It's not going to win a Peabody or a Pulitzer or whatever the right award would be. It has a short lifespan out there, and it doesn't need to be award-winning quality. What it does need to do is be authentic. And so that is where brand ties in, because if you know yourself and you know your company, you know what sort of content to post and repost and what sort of content to write on your own. So from an Irish Titan perspective, not that this is about us, but just to share firsthand examples, we are big proponents and follow a lot of different leadership sorts of writers and bloggers and things like that. We post a lot around leadership and growing a company, things like that. We actually don't post as much around digital best practices. Not that we don't know our space, but we're also wired in a way to get energy out of those leadership, growing a company sorts of content. So we post that. We have clients that aren't really driven by that, but that are driven by operational excellence. We have pretty good manufacturing base in our client base, and a number of those, as you would guess, really focus on operational excellence. They manufacture with great precision, really proud of it, Six Sigma, black belt stuff, all of that jazz. And so they post content, the ones who commit to doing the strategy right and the content right, post that sort of content. And so following what leaders you might follow in your industry usually is a good signal as to what sorts of things give you energy, which therefore is a signal as to what you might want to post. Okay? And actually, you win the first prize. You can throw it away later if you want. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead. So we're starting to run short on time. From a partner's perspective, go to 1, right? 5 minutes? Actually, I'm going to skip through partners. We're going to do to-dos. Okay, so the first thing to do to make sure that you do is just crush the blocking and tackling. You would be shocked, or maybe not, how many sites, how many clients that we bring on board who have terrible websites, or maybe have a decent website, but they don't have analytics installed. Google Analytics is all probably everybody in this room needs. We only have a few clients that have more sophisticated needs than Google Analytics provides. And it's amazing how many clients that we onboard from, that we convert from prospect to client, they don't have Google Analytics installed. So if you just have a good or above website, if you have your social marketing at whatever frequency it is, but you're doing it, you have analytics installed, you're going to be ahead of a lot of people, surprisingly. So if you crush the blocking and tackling, you will be in a good place. So make sure to do that, okay? Define and know your audience. We talked through that enough that I won't belabor that point. I won't chew my cabbage twice, as my dad would say. Write for people, make it discoverable for search. We also covered that. Start with mobile, including tablet. We didn't speak of this too much, but responsive design, remember, is the new technology that lets you build one website, one set of source code that will interpret the device coming to your website. On top of that, a further suggestion I would make is when you go through the design process in your project, start with your first homepage design with a mobile design. It's easier to expand that than to start with a desktop design and redact it. Okay, so that's one of the things that we've learned, sometimes the hard way, over the years, and now for about a year, we've been doing mobile-first responsive design, and our design budgets have hardly ever spun out of control now. Okay? Select the right partner and trust them. So I skipped through a little bit of that section, and for anybody who's interested, I can talk maybe after 1 o'clock, or we can go through it if we want. But there's a reason that there's an appetite for demystifying digital. And so what that means is you need to select the right partner to help you with that, and then trust them. And so if you go through the right process to select your partner, and I'll talk about that just a little bit right here, then you should let go a little bit and trust them. So in selecting a partner, some things to think about is how are they built? So do they have employees, contractors, freelancers, what combination of those? Because that speaks to how they're trying to go to market, how long they've been around. Another thing in our space, because again, remember, there are no barriers to entry. 2 people on their laptops at Panera or a web company. Do they have an office? If they don't, that's fine. That doesn't necessarily make them a bad provider or partner. But questions like that can help vet out what sort of structure they have, how long they've been around, what their financial model is like. So for example, with us, and I skipped over the whole Irish Titan intro because I didn't want this to be about us. But we have 25 employees, and we do all of our work with just our employees. We don't use contractors, freelancers, or offshore resources at all. And there's nothing wrong with any of those models. But when I started Irish Titan, I was intent on building a company that had a culture and had legitimacy and could possibly outlive me if I turned out to be an idiot who couldn't run a company. And so that speaks to that. If, on the other hand, someone has maybe a couple of employees and a lot of contractors, that's okay. That's just a different model. So questions like that can help you vet out what sort of partner you have. Ask them about their process. Do they have their process really well defined? Our delivery process is discovery, elaboration, construction, QA, and closeout. Those are our 5 phases. We have all kinds of deliverables with approvals within each of those phases. We have a lot of checkpoints. I could talk all day about that. When you're speaking to various partners to decide who's the right fit for you, ask them to describe their process. See if they can speak to it confidently and with some consistency, because that can demonstrate that they have their act together. Because it's easy sometimes to sell a website. It's hard sometimes to actually deliver it because there are no edges. There are no edges to the web. That's why scope can just go on and on and on and on and on. Okay? But if you select that right partner, then make sure that they're going to have budget checks with you. Make sure they're going to have milestone approvals, that you get to look at maybe wireframes first, which are blueprints, before you look at the designs, because those can help illustrate what sort of functionality you want. But then trust them. Don't ask to see everything they're doing every day, because trust me, you're not going to want to see how the sausage is made most of the time. And if you try to test your site before it's ready, you're going to find all kinds of problems that if they have their act together and you selected a good partner, that they would find in their testing if you would just let them get through it before they hand it off to you. Okay? Sub-bullet of that, anybody who has kids knows Frozen and that damn Let It Go song. Again, trust them, let it go, let them do their work, but hold them accountable. Trust but verify sorts of things. And then rinse and repeat. This is an important point. Once you build your site and then you move on to digital marketing, at some point you're going to need to rebuild your site. Depending on how well your site was built, how you phased those requirements, how your business might change, how the industry might change, your industry and the web space, you might need to rebuild it in 3 years, hopefully not. 5 years is hopefully the target, 3 to 5. The year before responsive design came out, Platinum Group that I showed you, we built their site the year before responsive design came out. Once that came out, in theory, you know, they could make an argument, we could make an argument that you're gonna have to rebuild your site. So sometimes there are things that none of us can control that start to prompt that sort of rebuild. Outside of that, if you build it right and your company doesn't change a lot, which isn't always a good thing, maybe you're growing and changing a lot, which would be a good thing, as long as you come out the other side healthy. But anyway, 3 to 5 years is a rinse and repeat kind of cycle. Okay? And then similarly, 7, 8, 9, or 8, 9, and 10. Just look 1 through 7. That was our last slide. So any other Q&A, it's 1 o'clock on the dot, you're welcome. Right, yeah, I'm done here. Any other questions? I can stick around. Greg, I don't know if you want to come up and close things out or not, but anything?